If you've ever scrolled social media and you're like, I don't even know why I'm doing this, it doesn't really feel that good.
Recently, some extremely important findings have been made in neuroscience involving dopamine. Neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman has spoken about this on various podcasts, and today we're going to break down these findings and how you can implement them into your life.
You think about wins and losses in sport, in life, in relationship, in anything. Something in your brain and body has to keep track of that. Did you win? Did you lose? What's a letdown? What's a celebration? And I think one of the most important findings in the last few years in neuroscience is that while the molecule dopamine is associated with reward, it's more about motivation and craving.
So as Dr. Andrew Huberman is saying here, dopamine plays a crucial role in the brain's reward processing, with important findings showing that it contributes more to the motivation for rewards than to the pleasure of receiving them. Basically, it's a brain chemical that doesn't just respond to rewards, it encourages us to seek them. Dopamine is about wanting something more and feeling satisfied once you've achieved it.
And when I say the common currency is dopamine, what I mean is the molecule dopamine, when secreted in the brain, makes us pursue things, build things, create things, makes us want new things that we don't currently already have. And so it has a lot of dimensions to it, but rather than think about dopamine as a signal for reward, like a dopamine hit, we classically talk about it, it's more accurate really to think about dopamine as driving motivation and craving to go seek rewards. That's the rat experiment. And it's a way of tabulating where we are in our life.
So, saying that dopamine causes pleasure is an oversimplified view. Dopamine actually does the bulk of its work before you feel that satisfaction. It's the motivation neurotransmitter.
Are we doing well or are we doing poorly? And that happens on very short time scales. Like, do you wake up feeling good? Or do you wake up feeling kind of low? Or on long time scales. If you're halfway through a long degree or you're halfway through your life, how are you doing? How do you gauge that? Well, it has everything to do with how much dopamine you were releasing in the previous days and weeks and years.
That can obviously have major implications for your productivity. If you can hack your dopamine levels, then you can trick your brain into seeking a pleasurable experience like crossing something off your to-do list and leverage neuroscience to get more done.
So you're always comparing it, and all of this is subconscious. But what's cool is that once you make these processes conscious, once you understand a little bit about how dopamine is released and how it changes our perspective and our behavior, then you can actually work with it.
So the big question is, how do you implement these findings? Are you consistently able to control your dopamine levels, or is this all just magic? Hey, you have more power than you think. Neuroscience shows that there definitely are things we can do to increase dopamine. Here are 3 of the most effective ways you can increase your dopamine levels. Number 1, squeeze in some physical activity. You assume that staying parked at your desk all day means you'll get more done. But if you've taken that approach before, you know it doesn't often work that way. Here's the thing though, a quick desk stretching session or a brief stroll to the coffee machine probably isn't going to do much for you. Aerobic exercise is what boosts dopamine the best, so you need to do something that actually gets your heart rate up. Whether that's taking a half-hour break for a fast-paced walk outside or doing a series of jumping jacks in between meetings, break a little bit of a sweat. You might just be surprised by the level of motivation you feel when you sit down at your desk again. Number 2, share your wins. Try to recall the last time your boss or a colleague gave you a hearty, good work on a task that you had recently wrapped up. Did you return to your desk feeling even more inclined to keep getting things done? Yep, that's no coincidence. Praise and recognition have been proven to give our motivation levels a boost. Recognition for good work releases dopamine in the brain, which creates feelings of pride and pleasure. Better yet, that dopamine hit cements the knowledge that more of that behavior will create more praise, resulting in another dopamine drench, and so on. Number 3, break big projects into smaller chunks. You've probably experienced that rush of satisfaction when you check something off your task list. That, my friend, is a dopamine hit. And remember, as Dr. Andrew Huberman just taught us, while those dopamine spikes occur when you achieve a reward, you're doing the majority of the legwork ahead of time. When presented with the potential of a reward, your dopamine levels rise to push you towards it. But that means the further away a reward is, the more our motivation will wane. You've experienced this firsthand. It's harder to muster up the motivation to work on a project that you know won't cross the finish line until a few months from now because the gratification is so delayed. Breaking your big projects into smaller milestones or actionable tasks is the best way to get more frequent dopamine spikes. A micro task feels way more attainable than a major project.
The problem is that pleasure experienced without prior requirement for pursuit is terrible for us. It's terrible for us as individuals. It's terrible for us as groups. And I have great confidence in the human species to work this out. But we are finding now, and we are going to increasingly find, that those who will be successful, young or old, are going to be those people who can create their own internal buffers. They're going to be able to control their relationship to pleasures, because the proximity to pleasures and the availability is the problem. But if you can start to identify the craving as its own internally released drug, this thing dopamine, that is a source of motivation, then what you realize is that capturing the reward is wonderful, but attaching dopamine to the reward is actually a little bit dangerous. Celebrating the win more than the pursuit, it actually sets you up for failure in the future. And so this gets us right into something called dopamine reward prediction error.
The key to optimizing dopamine is to be sure that the reward you experience is scaled with the effort involved to obtain it. This is a success story of modern neuroscience. The theory that dopamine neurons signal a prediction error, the error between what reward you expected and what you got. Dr. Andrew Huberman explains it really simple here.
And reward prediction error is basically if you expect something to be really great, and then it's not quite that great, your dopamine baseline lowers. And now understanding what we know about dopamine, that means that not only did you feel as if you lost because it wasn't as much a celebration as you thought it would be, but it also means that you're starting from a lower place, meaning you are less motivated. Anytime you have a bunch of dopamine and you're in pursuit, after you achieve a win, now this could be a business win, a relationship, a win of any kind, but inevitably there's going to be a tipping back of the scale on the pain side. And that pain side is always going to go a little bit higher than the dopamine side. So this is what you would feel if you pursued a goal like building a big company. Here it comes, the big sale. And then there's the, well, what now? The kind of letdown. Now, if you simply wait and stop pursuing dopamine for a short while, the scale starts to reset.
So this means that once the dopamine wears off, a person is often left feeling worse than before. So it is important to take your time after a big score. Don't rush into another adventure. As research of neuroscience and dopamine suggests, this will only decrease your chances of giving it your all on the next one.
The problem is a lot of people immediately roll right into the next pursuit. And then what happens is that scale starts to get stuck on the pain side. Little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And pretty soon, no amount of seeking will allow you to experience that craving and motivation. So what does this mean in terms of an actual tool? Well, first of all, if people can do what you do, they're going to be in a much better position in life. Doesn't matter if it's school, sport, relationship, any domain of life. If you can start to register, that craving and that friction and that desire, that almost kind of low level of agitation, sometimes high level of agitation, that is that I'm trying to impose my will on the world in a benevolent way, we hope, that's dopamine.
You should celebrate your wins, but smart people learn to adjust their celebration internally. Keep it down to a dull roar and don't go too crazy. Then you won't necessarily crash as hard. Understand that you will reset again. Give yourself a few days where you're going to feel a little bit underwhelmed.
And I think for most people, we think of the reward as the finish line. And so the key is to get to the finish line, step into the end zone, but no end zone dance. It's just like, yep, and now I'm going to go do it again. That's really the key. That's the key to doing it over and over. And when I see big athletes or academics or anyone or musicians and they rise and crash, it's clear they've lost the touch with the motivation evoked dopamine.